The communal table has always been a big part of creating meaningful community. It goes back to humans sitting around the fire, sharing a meal and sharing stories. It's a really great time for a storytelling. And humans are meaning-seeking beings, and they find meaning through storytelling. I mean, you experienced it, right? People just end up sitting around the table for hours and hours, just talking and sharing stories about what they're doing. But there are other little ways in which we do it. You know, I say the team members don't wear name tags because our guests don't wear name tags. And so there's a reciprocity there that you have to create where you get to know each other.
You just heard from David Leventhal, founder of Playa Viva, and this is On the Pass. I'm your host, Gabriel Ornelas. Each episode, we serve up inspiring conversations with dynamic figures across food, beverage, and hospitality. Welcome back On the Pass, listeners. Gabriel here. I just returned from Valle de Guadalupe, the prestigious wine region of Mexico's Baja California. I was invited to stay, play, and experience the valley through the lens of the beautiful property La Villa de Valle, owned by Eileen and Phil Gregory. Eileen and Phil also happen to be the owners of Benacava, a boutique wine project they started in 2005, focused on quality, not quantity. More to come on this experience in future episodes and content. You'll hear our next guest mention working with Benacava as he discusses how he's transitioning his hotel's wine program to an all-Mexican wine offering. But first, if you're new to this podcast, I'm glad you're here. Be sure to follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you can keep up with all our upcoming and past episodes. As I look at the back-end data, there's still almost 50% of listeners who have yet to hit the follow button. What are we waiting for? Trust me, you don't want to miss what's in store the rest of the year. Quick update on this year's On the Pass programming. My team and I will be taking a 6-week sabbatical to travel, explore, and meet up with a number of guests. We'll be back in September with all new episodes, but in the meantime, if you haven't yet listened to episodes with Jordan Kahn or iconic sommelier Daniel Jonas, or a recent episode we did with Ian Burrell and Aisha Dadrill, the co-founders of the Equiano Rum Company, you absolutely must. There's plenty to dig into while we're on this creative break. In January 2023, I traveled to the southern Pacific coast of Mexico in the state of Guerrero to experience Playa Viva, an eco-luxury and regenerative hotel that our next guest, David Leventhal, founded with his now ex-wife shortly after they bought the land in 2006. David is originally from North Carolina, but grew up in Mexico City in his early years, exposed to Mexico's rich heritage and culture. David had a previous life in tech and software development, but left much of that behind to pursue his passion for hospitality, sustainability, and his love of Mexico. In part, that passion also led him to co-found Regenerative Travel, a travel company connecting travelers with independent hotels that are rooted in community to enable people, nature, and culture to thrive. Think Relais Chateau for the ultra eco-conscious, sustainable, independent properties around the world. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check it out. While I was on that trip and staying at Playa Viva, David and I aligned on our love for building community and the need for genuine human connection, something David has done successfully since the beginning of his journey with Playa Viva. You'll hear more about Playa Viva's core values and why they have received numerous accolades from publications like Condé Nast Traveler, Travel and Leisure, Global Design News, and many others, which have put David and his team on a global stage. Now let's get into my conversation with David Leventhal of Playa Viva. How do you describe the offering and experience of Playa Viva and its importance, not just from a guest perspective, but for the local community as well?
Well, you start out with the numbers, right? It's 200 acres, it's a mile of beachfront, it's 19 rooms, it's farm to table, it's a watershed regeneration project. There's a lot to it. So that's kind of the starting point, are the numbers. Then, well, it's a mile of beachfront, but you're on that beach, right? You walk out, you look left, you look right. And while you're 40 minutes from an airport, you see nothing as far as the eye can see, right? So, that's the margarita at Playa Viva, $10, massage, $100, the beach, priceless, right? So, but people often ask me what the local community thinks of Playa Viva. And there's something inherent about that question that's like, well, we're part of the local community. Matter of fact, we're like the largest employer in the community. A lot of the people that work at Playa Viva are part of it. And I think it's evolved over time, right? At first, it's like, well, who are they and what are they doing there? And then the more they're engaged in coming in and their kids come in and they have friends and relatives who work there, the more they understand what we're all about. But I think, one of the things we need to do a better job with, and this came from a conversation I had with another hotel in Tulum, won't mention their name. They do a really good job with onboarding and listening to the head of impact for that hotel. I thought they were just going to talk about all the impact work that they do, and he's a biologist, and what they do in oceans and reefs. And no, he was mostly proud of the onboarding process, invited one of the guys over who was serving us, Ulysses, and said, hey, tell David about your experience with this onboarding process. So I think incumbent on us is storytelling and engaging our team in that storytelling as well.
Well, it's when you think about impact, I think a lot of people will think environment, but I think inherently the people in the local community, they are a part of that environment in a big way. They're contributing to that environment. I think I heard you say in another conversation that the knowledge that is learned from the farm that you have, which we'll get into, is translating to how people are showing up at their homes or how they're cultivating things maybe on their own private lands, and the pesticides and everything that they used to use, this knowledge, this insight, this wisdom that they're getting from your farm and from your cultivation, it's being imparted onto them and their families and their communities, which ultimately has such a positive effect. So, that is impact in a lot of ways. So I love that individual was more focused on the community and the people, because in a lot of ways, yes, the environment's so important, but you could focus on the environment, not focus on the people, and the people could not change, and the culture doesn't change. And it sounds like, and from what I saw, there's such a positive impact you and the team are having, and you're a part of that cultural fabric in a big way.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts that come to mind. One is we often do presentations for big groups that come to Playa Viva. And I remember one of the guests asking, was Maida, who's started as a volunteer, but is now head of the permaculture node of our watershed regeneration work, which is our impact work community. And they asked, what is your biggest challenge? And she had a beautiful response. She said, changing people's habits. And, there's negative impact, which has happened over time. Here is a community which didn't have plastic containers, wrappers, etc. And so when they had a tamale that was wrapped in corn, they would throw that tamale on the ground and the pigs would eat it, right? So they're used to just throwing their garbage on the ground. Well, now you throw that plastic container on the ground and pigs aren't going to eat it. Then they sweep it up, and what's their habit? Their habit is burning the organic trash that they have. So they just put the bottles in with the leaves and they burn that out, which, that's a negative habit. These are dioxins you're putting into the atmosphere. So, how do you educate people about that? How do you create positive impact with that? And I think what you're getting at is, Playa Viva, through doing things the right way and asking not only our guests to do it right, but asking our team to do it right, they then become examples to other folks in the community. We recently celebrated our 15th anniversary, and I am interviewing a lot of our team who've been with us the longest. And one of the questions is, how has Playa Viva impacted your life? And one of the stories that came up is Sulema, our assistant manager, was saying how she was driving with her daughter, and her daughter like had a plastic bottle, and threw it out the window. And she just pulled her car over and opened up the door and marches her daughter out. They have to like clean up the trash, right? And it's a teaching moment. But she talks about how her community used to be dirty. And through Playa Viva and this program with this guy Pato called Huluchuca Limpia, the community is called Huluchuca, and Limpia is clean, that there's these bins all over town to put your bottles into, your plastic bottles. And so she now sees her community as clean. Now then she followed that story up with, she's in the car driving with her daughter, and Sulema, throws a banana peel out the window. And the daughter like jumps on her, like, how can you throw something out the window? And, she's got to stop and explain to her daughter that it's biodegradable. And, there's compost and there's kind of trash. And so, but to know that that's an impact we had on her and that she's having on her child. And it's something we see all over Mexico. It's trash on the side of the road. To know that we can help change those habits, which is, going back to what Osmaida said, the hardest thing to do. That makes you feel good about what you're doing in the community and yeah, in general.
Yeah. I mean, any type of cultural shift is like, that metaphorical boat trying to make that turn. It's super, super challenging, and it takes sometimes generations. But I asked you the question because I'm always curious. Other people from the outside will describe it a certain way, but I wanted to hear how you describe it because, it's more than just a hotel. It's more than just a farm. It's more than just this regenerative ecosystem. It's so much more than that, and it really has had an effect, on the local culture, like what you're saying. And from your other work with regenerative travel is inspiring. Sharing of information with other people who want to do similar things, who have similar values and similar ethos for creating properties and experiences that are not just good for the guests, but good for the environment and good for the local communities as well. So that's why I kind of asked you that, because I think it's more than a hotel, and again, like you said, you were there, I was, and I got to spend time with I think Johnny, who might have been one of your first employees, who now you've sort of facilitated and helped into, creating a business, who was a joy to spend time with. Cultural shifts happen in small ways like this in smaller communities. And then all of a sudden these individuals go out into the world and take that learning, with them and impact other people. So I think it's quite exciting and profound what you've been able to do in that small community.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, you've touched on a couple of things. One is, we've trademarked the term and we use it at Playa Viva, and we've extended it to regenerative travel, which is where your vacation meets your values, trademark. And, these aren't George Bush's family values, but, but what it is it's a reflection of what my ex-wife, Sandra Khan, and I, how we wanted a vacation, and what we look for in a vacation. And so, yes, the other term that comes up a lot is guests tell us, you check all my boxes, even boxes I didn't know I had, right? As you mentioned, there's the farm to table and the impact and the zero plastics and the impact we have on the team members. And, there's so many layers to the onion there. So, and then Johnny's story, which you talk about. I love Johnny's story. There's a guy who had emigrated to the US, or, he's an illegal immigrant to that extent, came back home to take care of his dad, heard about this hotel that had opened up, came in, started out as a bartender with us, then became the head of activities, then decided he wanted to spin off his own business and created Johnny Adventures, which we supported. And now, he's thriving. His daughter took the exam. He's growing as the more places are coming into where we are. And Johnny represents, I think, what we want from solving these big global issues like immigration, right? If folks like Johnny have opportunity to stay at home, to grow, to educate his kids, to have access to good healthcare, why would they leave? So, that I think at a global level is something that Playa Viva is really helping to do in what we do in our small way. So, yeah, thanks for bringing up the Johnny story. And he loves to fish. So he's happy to take you out fishing. He loves to go up to the Gutierrez's and hang out with them, which became our most kind of popular excursion. So these are all real kind of experiential travel, immersion into what it is to be in that place. What is special?
Mm-hmm. We talk so much on this show about community, but it's really like the through line of both from the sort of communal living experience to how you dine at Playa Viva to even sort of how you experience certain activities. I think I've heard you say, and we've had conversations, and even when I wrote that article back like a year and a half ago, that was something that you and I had a lot of commonality with, was like our shared love for community and community building. And it's really ingrained in the overall experience of Playa Viva.
Yeah. When we first started Playa Viva and we worked with Bill Reed in the Regenerative group, one of the early steps we did was come up with 5 core values, guiding principles for what we did. And 2 of those really, I think, are over time have proven to be differentiators for Playa Viva. One is creating transformational experiences and promoting meaningful community. And I think you touched on that on various levels. So, I mentioned, this is how we like to travel. My ex and I would go all the way to the other side of the world, to Australia, to go scuba diving. And then we'd walk into the restaurant and it'd be like, table for 2, table for 2, table for 2. We're like, wait a minute, all these people travel from all over the world. Like, who are they? And they don't create that opportunity to create community. All right, sure, if you want your honeymoon, you just want your own table, whatever. So the communal table has always been a big part of creating meaningful community. It goes back to kind of humans sitting around the fire, sharing a meal and sharing stories. It's a really great time for a storyteller. And Zita Cobb of Fogo Island Inn, who I visited recently, I heard her say in a presentation she did, humans are meaning-seeking beings and they find meaning through storytelling. And it's great. I mean, you experienced it, right? People just end up sitting around the table for hours and hours, just talking and sharing stories about what they're doing. But there are other little ways in which we do it. I say the team members don't wear name tags because our guests don't wear name tags. And so there's a reciprocity there that you have to create where you get to know each other. And then there's the idea of not only bringing our guests into the common table around creating meaningful community and getting them engaged with our team, getting them out into the turtle sanctuary, getting them out on the farm. I don't know if you can see my arms, but they're spreading out wider and wider. And so really part of that guest experience is that you have a more in-depth experience in what the community is really all about. What makes that place special? What makes those people special, their culture special, the landscape special? And, another quick story about what makes it special too, and the reciprocity involved in community is, I don't know if you released baby turtles while you were there.
I did. Yeah. I woke up at 5 a.m. that day. And
so I don't know about you. The first time you release baby turtles, I mean, people tell us it's a life-changing experience, right?
Yeah. It's like a spiritual experience almost. I mean, it's incredible. The sun's coming up. You've got these baby turtles. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Right. But, if you release them every day, after a while, it's like, okay, there are the baby turtles. All right, it's going to take them about 30 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
There's going to be a couple in the front, most in the middle, a few stragglers. Hopefully we do it before the birds come. It's just like an everyday occurrence. And so for the people of the community who are there releasing the baby turtles, for them to have you share with them how special that moment is for them, helps them appreciate and reminds them, holy shit, this is actually pretty special. We live in a very special place. And I think that's part of creating meaningful community is that reciprocity.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like as humans, we automate a lot of things, like a certain repetition of things. Our brain automates it. It kind of becomes, routine in a lot of ways. But it's the same thing when someone comes to town and you get to show them the restaurant or your favorite spot. You get to kind of relive the experience through them. And so I love that sort of meaning is being reinforced, and showing that, this isn't just something routine and it's not just a job, but like you're doing something that matters, not just for the environment and for the turtles, but also to the guests who oftentimes, many of them, maybe this is the first time they've ever done that or the second time. And it's like this incredible experience. But going back to David, I think that's why we travel, is to at least that's the way I travel, to sit across the table from someone, to exchange ideas, to learn something, to learn something new, to be inspired in a lot of ways. And so when I travel specifically, that's what I want to do. I want to have an experience that is, I like a level of comfortability to the way that I travel. But if there isn't learning, if there isn't knowledge exchange, and if there isn't an understanding of the culture that I'm stepping into through the food, through the people, through maybe their wine or their spirits, I kind of don't want to do it.
Yeah.
It's like that. That's what excites me the most.
You nailed it. And one of my favorite quotes right now is Anthony Bourdain, who said, travel is not reward for working, it's education for living. And there's a paradigm shift in that is really, I think, addresses exactly what you're talking about and what is so key to me about that whole, where your vacation meets your values, right?
Mm-hmm. So you're right now sort of living as a nomad. I think you said to me the other day, you're spending about 6 months out of the year at Playa Viva, and then you're going to spend at least 6 months traveling and exploring. And in part, I think you said, some of the other properties around the world that you look up to, the founders that you look up to who are in the regenerative travel community. Where are you going?
Trip that I just did was to Fogo Island Inn, which I've wanted to do for a long time. And really, it was great because I got to meet Zita Cobb while there and really get to spend some time with her. And she did a nice presentation for the community. And hearing her talk about the topic that we discussed just now about creating meaningful community, she talks about ABCD, which is asset-based community development, and really how the strength of living economies going forward comes from building strong local communities. That community was devastated by the overfishing and the destruction of the cod fishing industry. And what she's done to kind of come in and really rebuild that community has been amazing. She's a real leader, and so much of the work that they do with things like the economic nutrition label, like how much of what you're buying is coming from Fogo Island or Newfoundland or Canada, or really beginning to understand how far things have to travel to get to where they are. I'm going to go to Ranchlands in about 10 days or so, and really get to experience what those folks are doing. There are many other properties that I want to go to. Bhutan is one that's on my list, really as a country, because of their kind of, but not looking at GDP, but really looking at happiness and wellness. But I saw a presentation that they did recently where, they've scored well on happiness, but the economic development model hasn't really spread out as evenly on people on the population. And so they're looking at how do they take that to the next level. So I think there's still some wonderful challenges out there. Hopefully I can be a part of those, thinking about how do we support communities like that and having that positive impact. But there's so many great places to go to. So it's nice to live that nomadic life. Playa Viva, what's amazing about it is there are people like you that come in who are doing amazing things. So it's like almost a TED Talk every day on the people that show up, and you get to have these conversations and build this network in this community. And then from there, the people that then invite me to say, come and see what we're doing, participate in what we're doing, contribute back to what we're doing. So that's been so rewarding about living this kind of life.
How do you think about the sharing of information or collaboration, or also educating hoteliers or hospitality entrepreneurs who want their travel to meet their values? You know, I think there's a growing number of, especially I think the younger community who go into hospitality, who don't want to see certain things at major hotels, or you know, I think there are cultural shifts that are happening and will continue to happen. But what is that sort of knowledge, all the knowledge that you've learned over the last, 15, 20 years and knowing all these other founders, how are you imparting that? Outside of, I think the guests of Playa Viva end up becoming in large part your microphone in a lot of ways, because they get to share their experience and their knowledge. But is it through regenerative travel, the platform you have? Is it through speaking engagements? Is there a robust sort of apprenticeship program or a mentorship program that you have or are currently working on?
I took 4 notes while you were asking that question.
I saw you feverishly writing.
Well, it says model of all major hotels open source. So let's see if I can touch on it.
Okay, perfect.
First of all, regenerative travel started out because a guest said, "Hey, David, we love what you've done." That's the whole, you check my boxes, even boxes I didn't know I had. Who else is doing this? And so that was kind of marketing idea. There's a business opportunity to begin to identify and cross-market. So it's economies of scale of cross-marketing. As I called hotels in and we sat around the table and began to talk, what became evident was, the cross-marketing is good, but how are you dealing with your gray water systems? What are you doing to onboard your people? It was all about sharing the best practices. And so that gets that whole kind of open source part. Anybody can come and stay at Playa Viva. They can see what we do. We want to learn from others, and we want people or other hoteliers to emulate. I think from a major hotel standpoint, first of all, I would say a lot of these big brands get poo-pooed or criticized because they're just big brands. Sustainability is good for business. Saving energy, saving water, saving, whatever, it goes to the bottom line. And so many of these hotels are leaders in their field related to that. I think the other side of the coin is some of these big companies are realizing, and this is a quote somebody told me recently, this next generation, they want to work for causes, not necessarily for companies. And if those companies are a cause, then they doubly win. And I think what companies are realizing is to attract and retain the best and the brightest, they have to do these things. Because if they don't, they're going to lose talent. And, companies like that, while many of them have assets and brands or whatever, they're still people-based companies and they require having the best and the brightest. So, open source, being a model. The other one is you talked about all the voices that are Playa Viva. We have a big volunteer program. And so we do invite a lot of people in to come and see what we're doing. And it's interesting to see how our volunteer network over the last 15 years, or interns, because now you really got to come and spend minimum 3 months with us, have begun to become this alumnus, a really nice network out there that are evangelizing what Playa Viva does. And then, obviously I do podcasts like this. I'm lucky to be invited to come speak at conferences and events and promote what we're doing. We've got some great videos on YouTube. The most recent one about Bessimar and our whole watershed regeneration project. Bessimar means regenerating from Sierra to Mar, really looking at things, the impact part from a whole watershed basis. So it's a open source model.
I love that. No, it's great. In the article that I wrote, which I'm going to put in the show notes as well, I think a lot of people know how good the food program is at Playa Viva, and I was really blown away, by it. And I think I wrote something about how you've received so many accolades from design to obviously being good for the environment and everything like that. But at the time I didn't see too many people really talking about the food. And you wrote something, after on the article, you said, there's this woman, Teresa, who's a frequent guest, and it said something about in Chinese medicine, our digestive tracts take in everything we digest. And while we eat, if we're watching obviously something negative or bad TV or bad television, we ingest that with everything else. I wanted you to kind of expand upon that a little bit, while then also talking about the food program a bit. We have a large food-loving community, within our audience, a number of chefs, and I really loved your team and what you guys are doing and ultimately the offering from a food perspective.
So first of all, I have to tell you, I quote you now, okay? You said, I don't know if you remember, you said, David, you undersell your food program.
Yeah, I did.
So that's the quote I use now. I was like, we're told that we undersell our food program, and we do. And so thank you for kind of bringing it to the forefront. And our food program is about healthy Mexican with an international flair. And it's sourced locally as we can. It's about promoting the recipes of the local women and also the ingredients that are coming locally as well. One of the things that we're working on now is an entire survey of our entire supply chain and where we get things from, and really beginning to focus on some of those stories. One of the stories that our team wants to focus on is the woman who makes the cheese, because there's like certain ranchers with certain cows that make the right milk that goes into her cheese, and then the salt that comes from the locally harvested lagoon salt is what goes into, there's so many wonderful details into something like the cheese, which is on every table, right? When you sit down, there's the cheese, the salsas, the salt. It's all kind of part of that Playa Viva experience.
Mm-hmm.
As far as, thanks for reminding me about that whole Chinese medicine thing. I'd forgotten that I had written that, but I think it does address that concept of what are we ingesting? What went into what we're ingesting? And not just the cheese, but that entire history leading up to that cheese and how you're feeling at the moment that you ingest that cheese. And how do you create an environment that makes all of that so much more rich and healthy for the system? One of the other terms we use a lot is immersion in the luxury of nature. Which is not being surrounded by kind of what I'll call human hum, the noise of the refrigerator, the noise of the air conditioner, the street noise, but really being surrounded by nature's noise has a different effect on us. And that's another part of kind of that food experience that you're having at Playa Viva, that ocean pounding in the background, right, as you're enjoying a ceviche that was handmade for you. So we could go on just for a long time, right? Just talking about food.
I know. It's funny, going back to the point of like, I guess I already know the answer to this question, but, you talked about your staff reliving the experiences of the guests when they get to release the turtles. But, for you, when you're there for 6 months, does your level of appreciation sometimes like you probably have to step away from it sometimes to appreciate it in like in a way, or do you get to a point where you go away and then you start missing being there, or you miss some of your staff or some of the food, because when you're there, I love it. You come down from you shake hands with everybody, you say hello, you sit at a table, like it's fun. Like it's every night it was really cool, and I think in a way, like there's this element of bringing personalities back to hotels, especially hotels like this, where and it doesn't have to be the owner, but there's a figurehead and I think you have that in a lot of ways where there's certain personalities within the, sort of the Playa Viva ecosystem that you continue to run into every day. And it sort of aids in that enjoyable experience in a lot of ways. But sorry, I'm layering on a few things, but I'm curious, does it get monotonous at all? Do you get like to a point where you're like, I lost that little bit of appreciation because I'm doing it every single day?
It's funny you mention that because I just was at Playa Viva and I'm usually never there during the summer months unless we're building something or whatever, expanding. And I walked in, I looked around and I was just like, wow, I forgot how really special this place is. And it's so good to have my eyes, like, it's like, your glasses suddenly got cleaned, and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, this place is pretty neat.
Yeah.
I think the other part of what you're getting at too is over time I've learned, and this came about when we worked with the Regenerative team way back, we started 16 years ago, talking about history of place and honoring place, and that a place, very much like a person, has this history. The more you know that history going back, the more you understand your role going forward. I've really come to see Playa Viva as a magical place with its own personality. And I appreciate the place for what it is. And so, yeah, for you, it might be, hey, David kind of walks down, say, whatever. But it's that magic of that place attracts, as I said earlier, so many amazing people. And it because we have inventory available at different price points, we get folks from different walks of life who come in there.
A full spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the spectrum isn't, the watch you wear, the car you drive, or the deal you did. It's
no.
It's something else. And that something else is part of that personality of the place that it creates on its own, that, maybe the game show host or whatever you want to call it, but
the game show host.
But those are the contestants. Are the one, we talk about Playa Viva. We close during the summer months, the rainy months, and so we're now in season 16 or starting season 16 in October. But everyone's a season, so it is kind of like blank TV show season whatever, and we have who's our standard actors, who's on the team.
Yeah. And then who are the newcomers?
Who are the guests?
The newcomers coming in?
and what's this plot? And it really changes depending on who's there too. It morphs.
Yeah. I'm sure. Well, it like you said, it's like Playa Viva alone has a personality. Then you bring in the staff and the community, which sort of then, interacts with that personality. And then you have this influx of different guests, some regulars, but then different guests, and the personality changes, from there as well. It's quite beautiful. I love that. Have you watched the Apple TV Plus show, Acapulco?
Not yet.
Oh, David.
Okay.
You need to watch that. But, it's like any show that takes place or a movie that takes place in a hotel. Hotels are worlds. They're ecosystems. There's a lot interacting with them. You've got the interaction of the people. You got interactions sometimes with the wildlife. You've got interactions with, the ocean there. And it's just ripe for storytelling. It's ripe for, really interesting interactions. It's you need to watch it. It's really funny. It's like this boutique iconic hotel that this American owns, and she doesn't allow the Mexican staff to speak Spanish at the hotel. Like it's takes place in the 80s. It's like this different time. It's really funny. It's very cheeky. But the storytelling and the character development, I think you'd actually really enjoy it. And I love that Apple and the team, most of it's in Spanish. Only when they're at the hotel, it's in English because they have to speak English, which is kind of, it's kind of the funny part. But I think you would enjoy it. But there's some commonality too to the personalities of the staff and how they interact with the guests and everything like that. There you go. Write it down.
That was me. Yeah, exactly.
So we talked the other day a little bit about layering on to this food program and the farm to table program. You're developing this, I think as you called it, grapevine to glass program, which I think is in alignment with your core values as you discussed and kind of how you think about things. But talk a little bit about that process of instituting more Mexican wine and sourcing from Mexico, whereas maybe previous iterations of Playa Viva, you were bringing in wines from Argentina or other places, around the world.
Yeah. I mean, this was a perfect Playa Viva moment, right? I have two jobs, right? I work my day job at the hotel, and then at night I work for Kike, who's the bartender. And I was I was at the bar, behind the bar, and ran into Stephanie and her partner. And Stephanie asked me a great question. She said, David, you've got this whole farm to table program. You're sourcing locally. Tell me, what are you doing about wine? And I was like, oh, shit. Yeah, you're right. Like, we've got wines that we're importing from Chile and Italy. And she's like, well, there's great wines in Mexico. I was like, well, help me. She's like, love to. And so together, we've traveled to San Miguel, Mexico City. She's helped us identify some great wineries. And we have completely transformed our wine list. So we only serve wine from Mexico. And our goal really is to serve as many natural wines, organic, biodynamic, and really support those wineries who are supporting that type of production at the same time. And there's great wines in Mexico.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really excited about the first one that we picked up was Vanacaba. And they make this wonderful natural wine. It's a white, it's effervescent. You look at it, and it's unfiltered, it's beautiful. The red blend is also delicious from them. And we then picked up Dos Bulls winery outside of San Miguel. It used to be an apricot farm. And as they pulled out the apricot trees, they replaced it with vines and make a bunch of different varietals. So yeah, slowly but surely, we are we have replaced all those imported wines, and it's now all Mexican wine. And that's, as I said, it's a classic Playa Viva story where somebody came in from the outside, and you think you're doing everything perfectly, and then somebody comes like, oh, excuse me. You're like, oh yeah, that's something we can improve on as well. So, and that's part of meaningful community.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's that knowledge sharing and that open source, and let's ultimately learn from each other. I think that's so important. What's been the most rewarding part of Playa Viva for you over the last 15 years?
I think it's the stories like the one that Zulema told about how Playa Viva has transformed her and has transformed her daughter. It's what somebody used the term with me called triple ripple. It's when you've had an effect on people that you don't even know in a positive way. And so that is the most rewarding thing about what we do. To hear Julia, our general manager, at a meeting say, doing the right thing is the hard thing sometimes, but we have to do the right thing. It's like, right? It's like, okay, drop the mic, done my job.
Drop the mic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, enough said.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. What do you want people to say about Playa Viva?
Okay, great question. I've never had that question asked. What do I want people to say about Playa Viva? Good things, You're
like, let's start there.
Right. They tried.
Yeah.
And
they did the best they could.
Right. I mean, when we get prizes, awards, what I want people to say is that even in a state like Guerrero, which is usually seen as one of the most unsupported, unrepresented, no NGO, nobody's doing work in Guerrero. It's like, wow, if Playa Viva can do it in Guerrero, anybody can do stuff in Guerrero. I want people to say, wow, those are some really beautiful, amazing, wonderful people. It's about the people at the end of the day, the community. It's nice to have iconic buildings that people are like, oh my God, the architecture, oh my God, the food, oh my God, whatever. But yeah, at the end of the day, I want them to talk about the people that were there. That, Kike was amazing at the bar. Marty attended me amazingly. The housekeeping team, the maintenance guys, or whatever. That's what I want them to talk about. I want them to talk to people.
I love that. That's beautiful. I'm curious because I've asked a lot of people this in the past, but being in Mexico, how would you define Mexican hospitality?
Yeah. I think it is cultural. I talk about how in the language and speaking Spanish, it para servirte, to serve you.
To serve you. Yeah.
Right. And, you look at in the US, much of our food, much of our, house cleaning, much of our, it's all being done. And this is a very, very hardworking culture and people. And you look at the food, right? Like, where would the Italians be without the tomato, right? And, corn, change the world.
Build empires.
Yeah. Mole, please. So I think culturally, it's also very rich. Look at things like Day of the Dead. I think Mexico has a great story of service, of quality of food, variety of food, and culture that's just so deep and so wonderful. And the U.S. is so lucky to have it there, to have it available to them. And, if people just think about the U.S. as sun and beach, I think Mexico's done a disservice in marketing itself. I think the people that have gone there have done a disservice to themselves. While it has great beaches, and it has great sun, there's so much more about Mexico than just that.
Yeah, it's an open invitation. We've had a lot of episodes, but for people to discover the plethora of opportunities from, the food, the wine, the spirits, tequila, mezcal, other agave-based, it's what I always say is just whatever brings you in, whether and sometimes it is mezcal. Maybe mezcal brings you in, or maybe it's tequila, or maybe it's you had this food from this chef, or you learned about Oaxaca and you're interested in the indigenous communities there, or something. Like whatever brings you in, get in, but discover more. Go deep with it because there's so much. There's so much that it offers.
Yeah, you talk about Oaxaca, going all the way back to Monte Alban or Mexico City and Teotihuacan. The cultural indigenous knowledge also is a big, big part of it. So yeah, you're right. Whatever your entry point is, keep discovering because there's so much richness there.
Yeah, I love that. David, what's a life lesson you can leave us with?
Oh, I think that being in regenerative travel has really made me much more conscious of the importance of reciprocity. And reciprocity has, I think, multiple facets to it. One of them is the golden rule part, right? Do unto others. The other part of it is the interconnectedness of everything and everybody, and to sometimes let things go. And I think the other part of that too, from a reciprocity standpoint, that I hear from a lot of young people is boundaries and knowing your boundaries and finding your boundaries. And so really, if the life lesson is anything, is dig into reciprocity in your life. And part of that also is not being extractive in your relationships, but building abundance in those relationships. And through reciprocity, you build that. And it often takes giving and giving, and knowing what those boundaries are and understanding where it fits into the whole system. So yeah, I think for me, at this point in my life, reciprocity is definitely something that I'm learning as a life lesson in how to tweak and fine tune throughout life.
I love that. That's beautiful. Dropping gems. Very, 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 very good. I can't wait to get back to Playa Viva. I'll probably wait till you're back there so I could bug you a little bit and we could spend some time together. But thanks for being on our show. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for all you do. And I'm going to encourage people to explore Playa Viva and look into regenerative travel and the other incredible properties and proprietors who are doing amazing things in hospitality.
Gabe, thanks for doing all that you do. Thanks for being such a wonderful voice. And thanks for inviting me to participate. Yeah.
Of course, my pleasure. On the Pass is hosted and produced by me, Gabriel Ornelas, and edited and mixed by Dylan Agajanian, with original music by Dylan Agajanian.